got all the lines. Mike, can the guests talk right now? Can we say hi to them?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. You can
Hi,
should be able
everybody.
to mute and unmute. Yep. Hi, everybody.
Hi, all your faces. Hi, Michael.
Hi,
Hi.
everyone.
How did Michael Lee not get stuck reading in this reading?
Oh my God! Damn it!
That's what he gets for moving.
Yeah, you moved to Ithaca, Michael. We lost track of you.
I have 7 email addresses now, so
Wait, Michael, you moved?
I did. I'm out at Cornell.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Congratulations!
I was gonna do I wanted to do a goodbye thing, but pandemic and all, it didn't seem all that safe. So
Well,
I'll do a welcome home thing when I come back.
Could you maybe read a poem for us tonight at the end?
Yeah, sure.
You're a mic.
I'd be honored to.
Yeah, we gotta get the mics in.
Surprise guest.
Yeah,
Surprise Mike.
a bonus mic.
Another mic.
Now with 20% more mic.
Oh goodness, I love it.
Amazing. Well, it's great to see everyone. Thank you for joining us.
So good to see you all.
Hi, Monique and Nell and Karen, Zoe.
Another sign.
Nice.
I made these the last time, but
Classic.
welcome everyone. Yay. Hi, everyone. It's great to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop's first ever Before Time reading series. Woo! My name is Su Hwang, and I'm an MPWW instructor, and I will be your host for the evening. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to remind everyone that this reading is being recorded and will be posted onto our YouTube channel. So if you're feeling bashful, please feel free to turn off your cameras and please remember to stay muted during the program. But hope you'll stay till the end and we can say cheers to our students and everyone watching on the inside to send them words of encouragement and support. And to everyone watching this at a slightly later date, we are sending you all the good vibes through the ether, through time and space and bars. So Before Time was inspired by our bi-monthly reading series with the Stillwater Prison Writers Collective. Since the in-person reading series is on hold indefinitely during the pandemic, we wanted to offer this monthly recorded event as a small offering to our students who we haven't seen since early March. There aren't enough words to describe how difficult this year has been for everyone around the world, but especially those in prisons. And the holidays are especially tough. So we wanted to get a reading to our communities on the inside as soon as possible in time for the holiday season. So to everyone watching and listening, we wish you good health, solace, and peace at this time. Also wanted to take a moment to thank all our generous donors to our annual fundraiser to make this reading series possible. Please stay tuned. We will be joined by local and national writers, as well as our instructors and mentors in the coming months. And in January, I'm really excited where I'm working on featuring 4 incredible Native women poets. So please stay tuned for those announcements. And tonight, MPWW is delighted to bring you the mics. And just now we have a fifth mic, so very exciting. And these mics are an integral part of the MPWW family. So after each mic reads, we'll have a quick chat, and then we will end the evening with a special message from amazing writers and instructors, Heidi Czerwiec. Oh God, Heidi, please say your last name. Sorry, I butchered it.
Czerwiec.
Okay, and Matt Rasmussen. But before we get started, I'm going to quickly pass the mic to Jen Bowen, MPWW's founder and artistic director, for a quick holiday message. Jen?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to let you know we're thinking of you, and we really miss being in the classrooms. And every year about this time, I start telling students that I'm going to light a fire for them when I get home that night in the fireplace. And this year is no exception. We're going to light all the fires in our fireplaces for you. And when we plug the lights in, we'll be thinking of you. And I think we're getting close to the other side of it, you guys and ladies and friends and folks. We will be in very shortly, hopefully spring or summer. And we're going to be loaded with books and composition books and pens and prompts. And in the meantime, please take really good care of yourself.
Thanks, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
So to get the night started, our first featured writer of the night is Bino. And thanks to our friends at We Are All Criminals and the Scene Project, you'll be able to watch Bino read two of his amazing poems tonight. The first is Cramped Spaces, and the second is Fire in the Hole, which was featured recently in Beyond Bars, our annual MPWW reading this past October. And that can also be found on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, please go check it out. It's amazing. So Bino's bio. Bino is a writer and poet whose work is forthcoming in A Darker Wilderness, an anthology of Black nature writing with Milkweed editions. His poems and stories have appeared in Doors Adjacent, Night Colors, among others. He is a 2019 Pamela J. Caligiuri Broadside Award winner and co-editor of Hidden Casts, Exploring America's Vulnerable Classes with Coffeehouse Press. Bino spent his formative years in Detroit, nurturing his grandfather's urban garden.
Short-breath people with the sky closing in on their world may rejoice in the cramped spaces created by a friend. The space around us we treat like a force field, a bubble. We should treat our space like a sponge and be more like a spoon instead of a knife, more like a puddle instead of an ocean, more like Nerf, less like Smith & Wesson. Cramped spaces have the power to mold and define us. We cram ourselves into spaces small and as dangerous as the chamber of a gun. It is our duty to connect and create an area's ambiance, grow the spaces into more than a room. We are its ammunition. These spaces were not created for our kind of explosions. We have accosted them and fitted them with our aura. Cramped spaces. We begin and end in these uncanny, personal, tailored places. Birth canals and coffins, we never choose them. They are chosen for us. Birth canals and coffins, we fit them perfectly, like peaches in a mason jar. Fire in the hole. Mirror gazing, reflective scab of a man. Cliff diving, Tweety bird burying, two-bit rascal. Pack mentality, tree climbing, scoundrel in a brothel. King of the mountain, fountain of the youth, searching, parable of a person. Who are you to be critical of our mental hospital when we created it? Come on, reach into this hole. Save me from your G.I. Joe's hostile takeover of Barbie and Ken's dollhouse, from being a snake oil peddling door salesman with nothing to offer, 4 jokers in a deck of cards, conniving con man, from that strychnine snorting, whip cracking, world crushing, hush money pushing, prostitute wrangling, nightmare monster creeping orange face. Save me, back flipping domestic terrorist, soon to be dinosaur in the Apple store, you high speed driving bad babysitter with a fifth of liquor, risk taking conservative anomaly of a role model, 2-gun toting deep thinker, reach into this hole and try and pull me out. Save me from flesh cracking miniature warheads, from the savory taste of illegal success, and the phrase he's better off dead, from the rain-filled days, racism maze, from the downswing of a cynic's verbal sickle and being euthanized with euphemisms. Save me like you save fine memories, you mirror gazing conceited, vanity indulged, mohawk wearing duplicitous thing. Unlearn my skewed facts and what I think a breaking point is. Uncapture my mind from the fake sound of freedom ringing. Unravel my thread from the line of our misguided free will. Save me, death-defying couch potato, flapping fish in a frying pan, you ice cube in Arizona heat with the hope of a burning phoenix, evaporating into nothing. Heartbeat of a tortoise, pace of a sloth. You're not ready to save me from the fate of an empty funeral and a dry eulogy. You unreligious man of the cloth, street priest with a faulty flock, Bible reading heathen, calorie counting gluttonous sin committing hog in a trough, street heretic, reaching to this hole and try and pull me out from being a love paraplegic, from being emotionally crippled, from being a bastard child of distorted lust, from biological clicks ticking in reverse and Hallmark card confessions. Save me, wanna be Casanova, wanna be outlaw, wanna be musician, you reflecting miscreant in a mirror, gremlin with a grenade, living in harmonious madness like Tupac and Sebastian Bach riding in a Maybach. Save me from a dream deferred in the hues of discrimination and the labels of the nation of incarceration. I'm not your inmate, I'm not your offender, I'm not your client, I'm not your patient, I'm not your reflection, I am your reflection. Now reach into this hole, come on, save me from dilapidated houses, crumbled relationships, smiles filled with potholes, darkened streets of disappearing adolescence, from ignorance is bliss, in the voice of my head from my ego's power trip. Save me, I dare you, wrench down into this hole and try and pull me out.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Bino. You're just such a powerhouse. We miss you, and just speechless. I can't even, just amazing. And we hope you're well. So next up, and the first of the mics of the night, is our good friend Mike Alberti, the managing director of MPWW, and whose work keeps our organization going and thriving. So Mike grew up in Albuquerque, New York, not New York, sorry, New Mexico. But he lived in New York. He went to college in New York. Received his MFA in fiction from the University of Minnesota. His debut collection of short stories, Some People Let You Down, won the Catherine Ann Porter Prize in short fiction and was just published last month. Woo! His fiction has appeared in many publications and has been awarded fellowships and residencies from the Carmago Foundation, the James Merrill House, and the MacDowell Colony, among others, and was awarded a Breadlow Fiction Scholarship in 2019. I'm thrilled to introduce and welcome Mike Alberti, the first of Mikes, the first Mikes.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you all of you for being here. We call Bino the closer because he is always the last to read at the Stillwater collective readings. And he's always the last to read because who would want to follow Bino? So I think we made a mistake there in putting him first. He should have been, I would say, at the end. I'm in kind of an unenviable position here, but I'm going to do my best. I'm going to read a collection from my book. A story from my book. And some of you, I apologize, will have already heard this. Sorry, Sue, Jen, MKD. I had to read this story in particular, I decided, because it was really, really, really inspired by the last classes that I taught, which one was at Stillwater and then one was at Faribault, and the combo of those classes and those writers and their incredible writing that we worked on in those classes really just kind of penetrated my mind. And this story I really think of as a response to them. And those writers really kind of pushed me into, usually my writing is mostly basically realism, but they kind of pushed me to extend the boundaries of what realism means and what we can talk, what speculative means, and to kind of trouble that a little bit and try some new stuff. So I always, when I think of this story, I think of those classes and those students, Will, Red, Connor, Zeke, Reese, David, Warren, Brooks, Sarith, Fong, B, Vaughn, and maybe one or two others. Hopefully I haven't forgotten too many, but I hope they might recognize a little bit of influence from that class. So the story is called The Upper Peninsula. I'm going to read kind of from the middle to the end. And all you need to know going in is that it's narrated from the perspective of a kind of middle-aged or older woman who she and her husband had a child who, a boy who drowned in Lake Michigan years ago. And every year they take kind of a pilgrimage back to the site where he drowned to just remember him. And the husband, kind of in his grief, has essentially stopped speaking. So that's just some background for the story. We took the old highway out to the coast. That part of the state is farmland, and I knew every farm we drove by. It was like driving into the past. Every now and then, Lake Michigan flashed between the trees. We drove with the windows down, and I could smell the dirt and the growing things. I pictured the fruit on the branches, still small and hard, but growing. Grow, I told them silently. I was trying something, this silent speaking. Get big and fat and round, I said. Finally, we reached a turnoff to our farm, and Abe turned onto the old dirt road. The trees parted to receive us, and the fields opened up around us. The fields were all grown over. They were meadows now, the long grass swaying in the breeze. We passed the old barn, nestled in the woods, crumbling, parts of the roof caved in. Our small white house was sitting at the end of the road. It seemed happy to see us as we got out of the car. The paint had peeled a little more each year. Don't worry, I told the house. Don't be ashamed. It smiled shyly in the sun. Behind the house, a grassy hill rises up to the crest of the bluff, where an old crabapple tree stands in deep solitude. Beyond, the bluff rolls down to the shore in a gentle sandy sweep. Abe and I walked up the hill through the grass, which swirled around our knees in the breeze coming off the lake. There used to be a path through the grass. It's all grown over now, but our feet remembered it, and I remembered watching 100 times out the living room window as a boy's bright floating head traced the path through the grass and then disappeared over the hill as he ran down to the water. As we approached the tree, I could hear the lake washing over the rocks below, and then it stretched out before us, flickering, green in the shallows and deep blue in the profundities. The moon was there, pale in the pale sky, half hidden in her own shadow, hovering above the water. A smattering of friendly clouds floated around her, big as continents, but weightless as breath. For a while, we stood at the edge of the bluff and watched the scene below. Abe closed his eyes. I thought He's listening, and so I tried to listen too. It wasn't hard to hear if you were quiet. The moon was calling sadly to the lake, and the lake, listening, was trying to lift towards it. Let go, I thought. I thought, once you let go a little, it's easy to go the rest of the way. Then, for a moment, the world was seized with buoyancy. Everything began to float up toward the moon. The grass stiffened and stretched against its roots. Bees and small white butterflies wafted up out of the grass, where they'd been called from their work among the wildflowers. The flowers lifted their faces and then released their pollen, which hovered in the air, a golden mist. Abe and I rose up on our toes. We lifted our faces like the flowers toward the moon. I held my breath. Let go, I thought again. And for a moment, I thought we might. The moon's call was loud and clear, and I thought for once we might all listen. The lake surged, and the crumbled roof of the barn thought about righting itself, and the crabapple leaves strained against their stems like green hands waving. But then a cloud passed over the moon, and we all fell back to earth. The leaves and flowers drooped. The pollen caught the breeze and scattered. The lake remembered its great weight and rested again in its bed. I was crying. Oh dear, I said aloud. Abe put his arms around me. I rested my face against his chest. We stood there for a while, breathing together. Then he tapped me on the shoulder. His cheeks were wet too, but he was smiling. He held up his finger and pointed down toward the lake shore. He closed one eye like a painter and slowly swung his arm along, tracing the shoreline with his finger. I sighted down his arm and imagined the coastline as it continued north, beyond where it disappeared into the trees, then wove along into coves and around the headlands out of sight, all the way up to the Mackinac Bridge. I knew what he was saying. At one time, we used to have a lot of cats running around the farm. They were farm cats, mangy and mean, surviving on the birds and mice. They came and went as they pleased and made their kittens, and often they would vanish without a trace. It didn't mean anything to us when they disappeared, but Jeffrey couldn't stand it. It seemed like every week he'd come and find me in the kitchen or the garden, crying because he couldn't find a cat he liked. But where did she go? He'd ask me. And I don't know where the idea came from, but at some point I started telling him that the cats went on vacation to the Upper Peninsula. That caught on, and after a couple of years, he was picturing a whole herd of frolicking animals up there. He was a sweet boy. I smiled at Abe to show him I understood. We walked back to the car. As we drove back out to the road, I waved goodbye to our farm. Of course, it isn't ours anymore. It belongs to a bank in New York City. Goodbye, house, I said. Goodbye, lost fields. Goodbye, old wreck of a barn. See you next year. On the drive home, we turned the radio on. One can have enough of anything, even quiet. When we got back to the apartment, Reggie was there, waiting for us by the stairwell. Hello, Reggie, I said. He mewed hello. He's an old cat and he's only got 3 legs, but he gets around well enough. He stops by sometimes when he gets hungry or lonely. Then he leaves and we forget about him. He's easy to forget when he's gone. Inside, I poured him a bowl of milk, which he lapped. As I put the milk away, I noticed the lilies again on the kitchen table. I'd been planning to take them with us to the farm, leave them by the crabapple tree, but now I was glad that I'd forgotten. They looked so nice on the kitchen table, so pretty and bright and hopeful. They were happy there. I cooked spaghetti for dinner and we ate in front of the television. We just watch whatever's on. Cop shows, game shows, It's all the same to us. But after the gentle quiet of our day, it all seemed so loud, so rude. When I finished eating, I got up to take a bath. I sat on the toilet and waited for the tub to fill up with water while the room filled up with steam. Then I climbed in and let myself float for a while. I was trying not to think, but my thoughts were coming anyway, as loud and rude as the game shows. I wanted quiet, to let go of sound completely. I released my breath and let my head sink beneath the water. Of course, there are sounds underwater too, but a different sort of sounds. I closed my eyes and tried to listen. I thought, these are the sounds a drowned boy might hear. I'd never had that thought before, and it made me feel better. I was glad to hear them, the swish and hum, the kind of lightness, the muted world. I thought, an ear is nothing but a hole in the head, and a drowned boy has those too. When I got out of the bath, Abe was asleep on the couch, head back and mouth open. His cigarette had burned out in the ashtray. The news was on, the war, booms and bangs. I turned off the sound and watched a little. Jeffrey would be there, I thought, if he'd grown up. I knew it deep inside. All the boys go these days. There are hardly any boys around here anymore. I turned it off and shook Abe awake. We went to the bedroom and lay down together, facing each other the way we like to do before sleep. I reached out to touch Abe's face. I traced his jawbone with my finger, feather light, the way he likes, up his cheek and around his ears, then over his forehead and around his eye sockets. I know that face, every knob and crater. Reggie jumped up and settled in between us, purring. Abe cooed a little, the way he does when he's happy, a pretty, fluttering sound. Yes, I told him with every part of me. It was a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Amazing. Amazing. Ah! So good. We have really talented instructors at MPWW, and tonight is just a taste of just the brilliance of our instructors and mentors, and everyone involved in our organization, as well as our students. So our next Mike is the award-winning poet Michael Bazzett, who is also a much beloved MPWW mentor. Michael's fourth book of poems, The Temple, was published by Bull City Press in 2020, and his fifth collection, The Echo Chamber, is forthcoming with Milkweed Editions in 2021. That's so exciting. Michael, when is it coming out? Do you know which month?
In the fall sometime.
In the fall? Okay, awesome.
September, October, yeah.
Sweet. His work has appeared in numerous publications, and his verse translation of the Mayan creation epic, The Popol Vuh, with Milkweed Editions, was named one of 2018's 10 best books of poetry by the New York Times. It's an honor to have Michael here with us tonight. And now, Mike.
All right. Thanks so much, Sue, and everyone. I'm delighted to be here. And I really enjoyed hearing Bino read again. And Mike, congrats on your new book. It's really fabulous. I don't think I've gotten to speak to you about it. So this first poem is called The Empty City, and it's from The Temple, the new book that Sue mentioned. That I'm very excited that they came up with a way to get the gilt foil stamp, because I wanted it to kind of look like a stealth hymnal, so I could just drop it into the church, you know, kind of have it be camouflaged and see if it could spend a little time there without getting cast out. The little quote at the beginning is by W.S. Merwin. It's one of my favorites. And it said, if you find you no longer believe, enlarge the temple. This is called The Empty City. I went to the doctor and found out there is an empty city inside me. The streets are broad and mostly clean. Trees are few and far between. No cars are parked on the boulevards. Why has it been abandoned, this city? Who used to live here, and why did they rush off to the countryside? I admit I was distressed by the news. I had hoped for a mist-cloaked wilderness, or at least a ragged branch of crows. Instead, I wander silent apartments. The closets brim with winter clothes. Now I lay awake and wonder, what will they do when the winds of November come and bite through their thin summer dresses? Somehow I wrote a poem called The Empty City before the pandemic started. I don't know. The zeitgeist was a little ahead of the curve there. This is a poem that was inspired by Jameson Fitzpatrick's poem, political poem that came out in Poetry Magazine a few years back. And it's going to be in the echo chamber. It's the first poem in it. It's called History. The vinegar tang of a glass of wine left out on the counter overnight. The hint of cumin on your fingertips, dried lavender. All this is the smell of you in summer. And now it is history. I woke alone and slid my legs into the twin flannel tunnels of my sweats, and it was history. I walked down to the 7-Eleven for a big gulp in lieu of coffee, and this ill-considered choice was history. The sweet syrup in the mix had never seen a cane plantation. It was born of corn, which is what the ancient Mayans said the first people were made of. And yes, this too was history, is history. Our ability to take a moment here to quibble over verb tenses is a consequence swollen fat as a paperback some thoughtless person left out in the rain of history. The melodramatic line breaks in this poem are history. Both the relatively justified length of line and the use of the word justified to suggest things come out even in the end are history. And the head fake back there in stanza 1, where you thought this might be about the end of a relationship, but discovered otherwise, is history. As is your inclination to continue trusting me. Because the fact that I can take the time to write this all down, considering what to include and what to leave out, as I tap keys that were injection molded out of a blend of thermoplastics by distant people I will never have to think of again, is one definition of history. One definition, not the first and not the last. I love it when Michael Kleber-Diggs goes like this. I love it. Okay. You should be a meme, MKD. Let's meme MKD.
I think it's happening. Yeah, it's
I'm sure anyone here who's had a book has had the reading where they showed up at a bookstore and there were 30 chairs set out and there were 3 people there, including 2 bookstore staff who sat discreetly apart from one another to kind of spread it out a little bit. I like that Matt's holding up just the number 1. Okay, there we go.
Just my parents.
Did they heckle you though? That's the question. I had a reading in Tempe that unfortunately it was for the Popol Vuh, and they were really excited. And then they found out that they'd scheduled it during spring break for Arizona State. And so I was, doing this reading, and it was fine. In fact, it was lovely. We all sat in a little circle. But it was at Changing Hands bookstore in Tempe, Arizona. And afterward, the woman said, well, we have this tradition here. your honorarium is you can just kind of pick any book that's on the shelf in the store, which is like, oh my God, like what? That's like being a kid in the candy store for a poet, right? And I had read in front of the poetry wall, and Robert Bly's collected poems had just come out, a thick, heavy, expensive book. And I wasted no time. There was no hesitation. I turned around and said, thank you very much. And I've been enjoying it greatly. So this is after Robert Bly. It's called Tell Me Again. Tell me about the sound of wind in the pines, the cushioned duff, the needles that make a clean floor and bring a hush to the understory. Tell me how deer come here at night to curl into ovals, how they dream of windfall apples, a scent like wine, how when they dream of wolves, their hooves kick out like knives. I can see the tamped outlines of their beds where they scuffle into needles that cling to them like fine red parentheses. Tell me how at nightfall, I split in two, and the other half of me comes here to these trunks, where I lie among the deer, and the sides of our bodies barely touch with every rising breath. This one's called I Enter Into the Cold. My co-author of the book was my dog, Zeus, who's featured prominently in this poem, who's also gotten significantly more fit since the pandemic. I enter into the cold and walk to the lake and then out across it, looking for something to bless, maybe a hole, grown closed after the ice fisherman left and dragged his auger home on a sledge. Maybe the smattering of silver minnows he cast aside, wide-eyed, frozen hard as glass. Maybe the hard afternoon light scraping low across the scalded crusts of snow. Maybe something, anything that I could offer here that would make us feel there is a marvelous truth in looking. But my dog is not looking and finds instead the space unexpectedly open and calling to him. And he runs and he carves huge circles into this temporary vastness on spring-coiled legs that are also temporary. And with every passing minute, the engines of his body incinerate roughly 7 minutes of mine. And the heat this makes rises in white huffs from his lungs. And I stop looking to bless, to be blessed, to do anything but listen to my animal burn the air into a kind of living smoke. A confession. When my dog started rewriting my poems, they got better. They suddenly possessed the ineffable whiff of multivalent sense, milked from the breeze by a wet black nose. The ear-flopping joy of open car windows, the quivering willingness to lick the ones you barely know, but sense that you might one day love. The squirrel imagery grew more pungent, more necessary. The piercing musk of unbathed human flesh rose sharp as wine intermingled with uncured salami. And when the page is closed at last, you had only to follow the circle of your own steps before collapsing into an untroubled sleep. There we go, it's dedicated to Zeus. Who's named after a Greek god, of course, but whenever I call him and say, hey Zeus, I realize I kind of got two gods for the price of one with that name there. Well, I read the first poem from the echo chamber, and this will be the last poem of the collection. It's called Comedian. And it's got the word Mike in the front line, the first line. So I had to read it. Comedian. The comedian slips the mic from its stand, gathers the excess cord in a loop, and placidly stares at the audience as he begins to pace. A few people titter expectantly. He stops pacing, looks up, shifts his weight to one foot, and the murmur dies away. The comedian's eyes roam the crowd. He raises an eyebrow. A woman guffaws abruptly, and the outburst is soon followed by a ripple of laughter. Time passes. The audience shift in their chairs, making soft, papery sounds. A man clears his throat. "Come on," someone shouts. 2 minutes pass. A few people shake their heads, chuckling uneasily. Others sit stoic, not chuckling at all. Whispers simmer lightly through the crowd, and people begin gesturing to one another. Is this the joke? Us? Near the back, someone says a name, Andy Kaufman, as explanation. After 7 minutes, the comedian whispers, "You have been a great audience ever since you were born." His voice breaks, and the breathy whisper fades into overwhelming awkwardness. He begins to take off his clothes. There are more clothes underneath, and then more clothes underneath. Eventually, his body itself begins to peel away in gauzy layers, and it becomes clear he's not a man, but a slender woman. And then no longer a woman, but a heron, and not a heron, but a blade. And soon it is clear he is not even that. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for having me. It's really an honor to read with all of you.
Thank
Cheers.
you so much. Thank you, Mike. It was awesome. Wow, beautiful. And congratulations on Temple and the next upcoming book. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here tonight. We have almost 40 people in the Zoom room, and just putting out really good energy for everyone watching on the inside. So thank you for being here. So our next mic is the much beloved MPWW instructor, board president, Beyond Bars annual reading MC, Michael Kleber-Diggs, who also moonlights as a poet, essayist, and literary critic. His debut poetry collection, Worldly Things, won the Max Ripko Poetry Prize with Milkweed Editions and will be published in June 2021, which is so exciting. Woo! His work has appeared in numerous publications and is a past fellow with the Givens Foundation for African American Literature, the former poet laureate of Anoka County Libraries, and is the recipient of numerous fellowships. So Michael, it's great to see you, and it's all you.
Sue, thank you so much. Great to see you too, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not the most Christmassy person of all time. I'm just going to tell you that up front. I think in America we have this tendency to ruin every holiday. Name one that isn't ruined. But this year I found myself needing holiday more than most. And this is a poem called Bravely Green in Wintertime. Discotheque lights, a festive skirt, luminous beams spaced evenly, a fresh aroma of pine, the outside, inside, ornamental memories, our first Christmas, presents, the things we add each year, fragile things, all the things we've lost, not just objects, lights, so dark these days, us, our evergreen rituals imbued with new meaning. Green is the color of renewal. We water this tree every day. We leave its lights dancing. Michael Bazzett, the unspoken heroes of my writing year, of my 2020 writing year, are my two dogs, I should say our two dogs, because if I say my, then I'm on the hook for every feeding, every walk, every our two dogs, Ziggy and Jasper. And I've been working from home, and they have me outside all the time. And when I'm outside, I'm taking in fresh air, and I'm noticing the world around me. And the things that I notice have been sneaking into my writing, as have they. I'll make sure to give them credit, extra bone under the tree or something along those lines. But I love that Zeus appeared in your work. I love that Jen's dog made a cameo earlier. I love this aspect of our Zoom life where we have special guests appear, people who can't ordinarily join us, able to click in. And so that's wonderful too. This is a poem called Our 10 a.m. Black man, blue vibe, station wagon parked in the park, same spot all day, every day. Hubcap gone, one window, a bag, on the phone he is. We are about the same age, about the same size, both sport fat beards, glasses worn in his gray black hair. Wan sky, gray dog, black man, the soft lights, long nights, seat leaned back, nose, lips just visible above his door window. He don't see me, my reflection as I return home. I'm a little bit shy about this next factoid, but we're all friends. And among friends, there can be no secrets, and there can be no shame. I can just tell you who I am and count on all of you to love me fully. And the thing is, I have, for most of my life, been exceedingly fond of the Russian pianist Vladimir Horowitz, like beyond what makes sense. Anyway, this is a poem called Soon After I Arrived to Heaven. Soon after I arrived to heaven, I ask around until I find who I'm looking for, Vladimir Horowitz. And he is exactly as beautiful as I imagine him to be. We don't drink vodka. He has a Cafe Cubano, and I have a Mexican Coke with extra ice. I tell him about the first time I saw him. It was on Sunday morning. I was in my bedroom in Wichita. He was on a stage in an opulent hall in Moscow. His grand piano seemed small to me. He seemed impossibly small to me. He wandered out slowly. I knew something gigantic would happen, but I didn't know what. What does it mean to go home? The hall erupted. I tell him about my tears. As we talk, we hold hands for what feels like an eternity. Please understand, I don't believe any of this. It's just a fragment of my imagination. And how would I describe to you his eyes? Without time, there's no such thing as exhausted. I say, can I ask you a question? The master nods. Okay, I say. You know that Mozart piano concerto, number 23? That time when you played it with La Scala? Okay. At the 3-minute, 3-second mark, did you make a mistake there? I don't remember, he says. Then, possibly. And how would I describe to you his smile? What does it mean to be happy in an existence without anguish? Young poet, he says to me, soon. And here I realize soon no longer has meaning. Soon you will know how things work in the life we have after the life we had. He grins out slowly to a gentle laugh. Perhaps I would say his teeth were imperfect. Yes, yes, he says. I probably did. This is the time of year when I'm fond of reflecting on all the experiences that I had this year. Some of them were wonderful, and of course, some of them were difficult. Some of them were uniquely mine, and some of them were experiences that we all shared. I reflect on the year and the albums I loved, and the books I loved, and the television shows I loved, and the conversations I had, and the things that I lost, and the things that we lost. And I'm reflective this time of year. It's difficult not to think about the pandemic. And I was in the middle of a class at Shakopee, and I just had this sense that it was going to be the last class, but I didn't want to say it, and I didn't want to say goodbye. And I look back on that all the time and wish I'd done it differently. I was so worried that I was going to jinx it that I just left, and then it was done. Here, of course, in Minnesota and in the Twin Cities, we had the loss of George Floyd. And this is a poem called Grinding Down to Prayer. It's, I think, the only poem that I'm reading tonight that's in Worldly Things. And I wanted to keep George in mind as we wind the year down. I woke to the news you were dead. The what arrived before daylight. The how was an agony unfolding as I dreaded my way to dusk. Unfolding against my want not to know. But I already knew. Have known since I could know. Officers, arrest, black, man, 20, video, knee, sir, back, dollar, 8, counterfeit, hands, sorry, 46, mama, please, breathe, please. Were you tired, George? I feel tired sometimes. America on my neck, my lungs compressed so much they can't expand, contract, take in, send out, oxygen, words. My dentist says I grind my teeth. My molars are wearing smooth. The next night I jolted awake to find my fists clenched tight, some fight, my heart pounding fast, my mouth hanging open, slack, not tight that time, just me on my own, gasping for air. 6 times a minute, a raspy sound. The world was darkness. My room was darkness. I lay in a state of in-between and thought of you, but also God. I wanted the sun, but did not ask. I hoped instead for a quiet dawn and peace for us. Real peace for us. I hoped so hard, it almost made a prayer. I want to say just my last poem is called Eggshells, and it's a real honor for me to be here with all of you and in community with all of you. And I'm so excited about the idea of this video being shared and hopefully building community, and Bino and Michael and Michael and Michael and Michael and Michael. I just adore you guys, and it means a lot to me to read with you. I wanted to close with Eggshells. I honestly wasn't going to do it, but then I saw a note that the executive managing editor of Waterstone Review was going to be joining the reading tonight. I won't call him or her out. We're shy people, and I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but Waterstone is a great journal, and it's based in Hamlin, which is a wonderful institution. And it's also an institution that birthed the Minnesota Prison Writing Workshop. It's where we hold our annual reading during non-COVID times. Sometimes we borrow a little office space, the creative writing programs building. So there's a real tight connection between MPWW and Hamlin. And I think it's okay for me to say that from time to time, they print our work from our students and from our alumni. So as you're refining pieces, and you have a chance to think about who you want to share it with, I hope you'll keep Waterstone in mind. I'll close with Eggshells. Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you. I can't wait. Ooh, I can't wait to teach again and to be to have a reading at Stillwater again, and to just be in community together again. It will mean so many things, that we're on the other side of a difficult time, and that we can share ideas together. I look forward to that more than I can say. This is Eggshells. I will be happy today. 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 Blue eggshell beside its own wet violence. I will be happy today. Nothing's theoretical, not even desire. Regular routines, real rest, real time with real friends in real life. I will hold you to me, my heart close to your heart, like always. I want to see you again. I want to be like birds. Know we are fragile and break, but go on making music. I want to tell you, every morning I sing out for you.
Wow, that was amazing, Michael. Sun Young is holding up something. What was it? Oh, it's the poem, The Broadside. That was amazing, Michael. Thank you so much. And, you know, thank you for naming George Floyd tonight. Just rest in power to George Floyd and to everyone we've lost, and to everyone who's been taken from us this year. How to continue? Okay. The next mic of the night is another beloved MPWW instructor, poet, essayist, and new father. Where's Cora tonight, Michael? Is she sleeping?
Yeah, it's like 9 o'clock. She's asleep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, Michael Torres was born and brought up in Pomona, California, where he spent his adolescence as a graffiti artist. His debut collection of poems, An Incomplete List of Names, was recently published with Beacon Press, selected by Raquel Salas Rivera for the National Poetry Series. His honors include awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the McKnight Foundation, Bread Loaf, Contamundo, among others. Currently, he's an assistant professor in the MFA program at Minnesota State University and Mankato. Next up is Michael Torres.
Thank you, Sue. Thank y'all for inviting me. I'm always like trying to rush myself at the end if I read at the end, because I'm like, everybody's tired of poems. Anyway, I want to say that, so so, and I've been thinking about reading and thinking about our students all day today. But I also like learned that the poet Marvin Bell died yesterday, and which made me think immediately of like reading one of his poems while I was an undergrad, and that was at a point when I was barely thinking of myself as a writer, and but I read a poem of his in class and was like, okay, this is what I want to move towards, and like this is like a language I understand, and so I wanted to share, like I wanted to start off my reading with reading a poem of his. But another thing, what that made me think about was when I would bring in poems of published authors into the classes, like particularly this happened at Faribault. I would bring in poems. I'd be like, okay, this is by this poet and this is by this poet, and one day they just stopped me and they were like, hey, like who are these people, like we want to know their bios too, like. And I thought that was like a thing. I think it was a thing that I took for granted because I could look it up if I wanted to, or I don't know, like I just didn't think about it, like I could look it up. So I thought it was a really beautiful thing for them to ask. So I do want to start off with a poem by Marvin Bell, but I'll just give a little short bio of his. Marvin Bell was born in New York City on August 3rd, 1937, and grew up in Long Island. He earned an MFA from the University of Iowa. Bell taught for 40 years for the Iowa Writers Workshop. He died on December 14th, 2020 in Iowa City. And I'm going to read to Dorothy. You are not beautiful exactly. You are beautiful inexactly. You let a weed grow by the mulberry, and a mulberry grow by the house. So close in the personal quiet of a windy night, it brushes the wall and sweeps away the day till we sleep. A child said it, and it seemed true. Things that are lost are equal. But it isn't true. If I lost you, the air wouldn't move, nor the tree grow. Someone would pull the weed, my flower. The quiet wouldn't be yours. If I lost you, I'd have to ask the grass to let me sleep. Okay. I'll read this poem called "Push" from the collection, and then I'll move on to poems outside of the collection, like newer stuff. Push, and it's in. That's funny. I've never read this one at a reading, so I'm like, it's in 3 parts. It's in 4 parts. Push. 1, man pushing mower. So I enter a yellow house. That's what I've come up with. It's silence. I stare at the floorboards. I reach a window, and a man who looks so much like my father, I can mimic his walk, pushes a mower. He should be my father, but he is a stranger, and I'm not surprised. The house fills with the smell of cut grass and gasoline. 2, wanderer. Today, no one forgave me. I heard the word whitewashed, and everyone knew of my lost Spanish tongue, like a ticket home that slips under a bench. I thought about bleach, and the wrinkles of eyelids stung shut. So I began to walk the streets, listening for a way back. Up and down blocks, the buzz of mowers, hedge trimmers over ivy, elephants stampeding green. Men behind machines never stopped pushing, never stopped to turn their heads at me or the swelling sun. I offered what the cloudless sky offered, nothing. They loosened bandanas from their foreheads to swing cool again, only to tie them back on. No one would tell me which way to go. 3, street vendor. Her frame hunched over the cart, wheels squeal with lost strands of hair. I whistle a last chance. She stops, but doesn't look. Children swarm with importance, their crumpled dollars shoved past the guilt about to leap from my mouth. Elotes con queso, she says. She plays mother, apron and understanding. I write down every word like taking directions, listen to her flip back and forth. Tengo raspados de vanilla, blue raspberry, y red cherry. I order a snow cone. She takes my money. Ayúdame, I say. She hands me a napkin and a quarter. Ignorance is a type of penance. I know I can't go where she is going. Home to a book she will rest on her lap before she yells across the room for quiet. From outside the house, however, I might catch a word, perhaps an entire phrase in Spanish, before it breaks against the closed ear of sky. 4. Walking through Home Depot parking lot. I won't accept language without its love or loyalty. Today I found men within thin shadows of a gas station and thought, if I buy them bottles of water, what would my offer me? Hope that they might see me tender and pliable, that they not welcome party me with teeth. I am so made in America. I want to believe I am still the primo they once met, young and forgivable, but I am also who I am by who they must be to me. Every word we don't speak unspools in glances, silence sewn into place. Those men against walls laughing, 3 to a circle. Those men. Here, everyone listens for whistles from a truck window except me. I feel like after my Minneapolis reading, when everybody was reading my poems slower, like particularly Michael Kleber-Diggs, I started reading my work slower. I don't know if it's better for it, but I think of that now. So I have 2 more poems. They're prose poems, and I'm thinking in particularly about the last class that I taught, which was this time last year, I believe, at Shakopee, and how I feel like my classes could get pretty intense, or that I could really want to push my students because MPWW has some of the best students I've ever taught. And so I could really kind of push them to get to like those really hard to reach places. And there was one class in particular that sort of exemplified for me how important and how much this was like a community sort of thing. And it wasn't like I was a teacher and they were the students, is that we were kind of teaching each other. There was a student who I wanted them to continue writing about this certain subject or topic, and like we were going back and forth on like how to do it, and it got like a pretty emotional moment until some other student told the student, well, we'll try it in third person. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? But that's brilliant. Like, yes, like give that distance to yourself if you need it. And so this past summer, I was writing a few poems after the poet Jose Hernandez Diaz. And so I have a bunch of prose poems, but I'm going to read 2 of them that I have here. So this one's called The Cave. The night before his daughter is born, Ignacio is the only one parked in the lot near campus where he works. Across the street, a gathering of what sounds like friends outside a Catholic outreach center that advertises Jesus via free sloppy joes and root beer on Friday nights. Ignacio reads a book under the streetlight in the center of the lot. With the window halfway down, the streetlight strikes a thin shadow across his pages. Through the window, he hears someone laugh, saying, "No way." Further even, storm clouds. Lightning bolts desire sky. The storm will either arrive or miss him entirely, and Ignacio can't decide which will help make a better version of himself. He listens for thunder, but catches only a few words from the maybe Catholics. Then the smell of charcoal, more laughter after that. A car pulls into a spot near him. A man younger than Ignacio gets out and pulls a skateboard from his back seat. Ignacio doesn't notice he's closed his book and set it on his lap. The younger man locks his doors and rides away on his skateboard. Ignacio stares, rides away with him. There's a breeze then, and what it carries. All right. This is the last one, and it's called Origin Story Epilogue. Ignacio likes to think that one day there'll be a picture of him on the wall where he's not crying. He's using the term wall metaphorically. He just wants to be tough again. He was tough once. He didn't dance or talk much or sing unless you count whistling. Ignacio doesn't count whistling. He said whistling's more like captured breath, whose only way out is through its tune. Picture a plastic bag snatched by a branch. The only release is through its ripping. Thank you. Thank you all. And hi to MPWW students. Miss y'all.
Thank you, Michael. That was beautiful. Your readings always just take my breath away. Everyone's breath away. Before we move on to just a quick chat with the mics, we have a special mic with us. So Michael Lee, did you get a chance to teach at Faribault before you moved or before the pandemic?
I got 5 classes in.
Oh, really?
Which
that was better than none, right?
Yeah, it was better than none, but it was tough.
Yeah. Well, Michael's gonna read a poem for us just because we got to get all the mics in. But just I want to read Michael's bio very quickly. Michael Lee is a Norwegian American writer, youth worker, and organizer. He's received grants and scholarships from Breadloaf, Minnesota Arts Board, Loft Literary Center, among many others, has been published at numerous publications. Michael has worked as a dishwasher, a farmhand, a teaching artist, a social studies teacher, a case manager for youth experiencing homelessness, and currently manages a youth program using food as a tool for health, wealth, and social change. Are you still doing that in Ithaca or?
No, I should.
Not right now?
Should update the bio. I think.
it's okay. And his first book with Button Poetry is called The Only Worlds We Know and is available now. And Mike is going to read a poem for us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I guess this makes it an open mic.
That was a good one.
Thank you. I've been waiting all night to tell that joke. I had emailed Mike Bazzett just asking how he was, and then he sent back and said, "Hey, there's this reading tonight," and he gave the list of names, and I was like, "Oh, great! The semester just finished up. I'll hop on." And then I'm having dinner, and I was like, "Wait a minute, that's all Mike's." In any case, thank you for the work, Mike and Jen and everybody. I can't say enough good things about MPWW, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to have taught a little bit in Faribault. And Mike, I went in with the first time. Mike Alberti brought me in and to talk about the book, and everybody was asking questions. And then at the end of the class, they're like, "Can you come teach a class?" And I was like, "Y'all know so much more about poems than I do, but I would love to come kick it." And so I'm grateful for the chance to have been able to do that. And sadly now on the other side of the country, but when this is all over, I'm definitely trying to come back and jump in and join you guys. So I'll read a new poem that I wrote recently since I've been out here. And this is called Norway's Iron Road. When in the valleys below, as the train curls the mountains from Røros to Bodø, the grass has already begun to whiten beneath frost. And when the railroad ties, dark with pitch and tar, the color of the coffee cooling now in my mug, become painted over with autumn's early snows, the deer begin to gather along the tracks, eyes wide as lights gone out. There's a joke I heard one winter, one popular among the farmers from Hedmark to Nord-Norge. 2 deer run along the railroad, a train chugging quickly behind them, its steam lifting from its stacks, curling back along its long, shimmering body like a gray kerchief torn loose by wind. The train's light parts the dark hanging over the tracks. Like black water, it rushes closed again as the train passes through it. The deer, frightened now, as the bellowing yellow eye grows closer and louder, turn to each other. Their bodies galloping so lightly their heads do not even move. Only the legs, and where the legs attach at the flanks, the muscles moving up and down, churning forward and back like a steam engine's coupling rods turning its wheels. It's almost as if the deer are marionettes, and only as alive as an audience might believe them to be. One deer says to the other, eyes wide with fear, "We have to get off these tracks and into the forest." The other looks off into the dark muscle of night and says, "No, if we can't outrun the train here on the tracks, we'll never outrun it in the woods." And there the joke ends. But if we follow it a little longer, the deer turn back to the unending seam of metal and oak ties, a long stitch drawing closed a wound, and continue. Their legs chug forward, a perfect staccato charting the heart's terror through the valley. The hooves keep time, even in the thin, cold air, as the train's iron nose cleaves their bodies in half, sending them into the sky. The snow reddens like the country's flag, or the currents once used to stain its woolen yarn, before the flag was outlawed by the Germans for the duration of the war. The train trundles on, and I sip my coffee and smile. How the farmers smile when they tell the joke of the deer, at the early light strobing through the windows as the train passes quickly by trees. And I think of them who, with less mirth, told me that in late autumn, when the country is blank with snow, so many deer are split by trains that the snow is stained red from one city to the next. A carmine thread, long, bright, and unbound, leading back to the source. From the sky, it might all look like a map made of blood. There were so few train lines before the Second World War that one needed to walk between towns. Then miles and miles of tracks were built by Russian slaves who the occupying Nazis worked to death. And because they were slaves, they died without ceremony, but because they were in the way once they were dead, the Russians were forced to bury their starved countrymen miles from their country, already stiff from cold before dying beneath the tracks. But not before they took from them their boots, if they had any on, or perhaps a single tattered sock. Whatever might keep them warm or alive a little longer as they worked around the clock. Their mauls clinking against steel like metronomes, their progress measured in their thinning numbers, the fresh, dark soil peeking briefly through snow before being erased by snow. If I let my mind wander further, as it is easy to do in the train's leather chair, the golden light cracking open the northern farmlands like a blind, lost in the low murmur of voices in the dining car, the light clink of coffee mugs, the clack of the hole punch of the ticket inspector passing through at each stop. I picture each time the train lurches just slightly out of rhythm with itself, that we have struck a body, almost as if the slightest rift in comfort is itself a monument. Aren't all luxuries remnants of war and slaves of one kind or another? These tracks, this iron road, diamonds and gold, the metal needed to make the phone in my hand, capturing forever the landscape passing before me. I catch 3 fawns running through the trees, bounding with the sheer weightlessness of being alive and having no idea at all, free of everything as they are besides the inevitable. It is said when prisoners of war are killed, they climb out of their collapsed husks as if from a cellar. The spirit, much smaller than anticipated, steps cautiously up the ribs like ivory stairs, careful almost not to make a sound, to then step from the body and float off, maybe like steam or smoke, until it returns, cursed maybe, to fill the body of a deer, terrified and fleeing. The spirit now, watching from inside the animal, a conductor frozen behind the controls as the railroad kills them a second time, a third, A country mapped with spilled yarn, leading back to the beginning and its end. The legs in perfect time, the clatter of hooves, or iron, or bones, the coupling rods powering an iron lance through the bodies, trying to outrun what cannot be outrun.
Thank you. Wow, that was so powerful, so vivid. Thank you so much, Michael. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. So we're gonna have a quick chat with the mics. I'm gonna ask one question, and each mic is gonna just kind of answer the question, and then we have a special message from Heidi and Matt. So the question that I have for the mics tonight: it's been a rough year for everyone, and it's been difficult for us to write, inside and out. Have you experienced writer's block? And if so, what have you done to work through it? Do you have any tips, methods, or anecdotes you can share with the community? Can we start with Mike Alberti, and then we'll work down?
Me first, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have experienced some, but somebody told me once that the best thing to do when you have a book come out and you're like kind of anxious about it or seeing what's going on is like be really deep in another project. So at the same time, so I've been trying to do that. It's been a grind for sure, but I've been trying to work on it. I don't know, in terms of advice, I would say like just everybody be easy to yourself. And if it's not coming, know that it's building up inside you, and all your ideas and impressions and images and language, you know, is brimming up, and it will come out at, you know, the appropriate time. And if you're kind of somewhere in between, like, I don't know, not being able to write at all and really having a good dedicated practice, then maybe maybe just take like a couple minutes a day or something and write down briefly one impression or one kind of scrap of language or something that you've heard, and put it in your notebook. And maybe, you know, weeks or months from now, that'll come to look a certain way to you, look like something that's larger than the sum of its parts.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think writing sometimes, you know, I don't think the act of actually writing or typing is it. I think just observing and pacing, staring at the wall, I feel like they're all part of the process.
Yeah,
so.
Thinking, reading, sleeping, all of it.
Cursing. Yeah. Thank you. So Mike, next Mike Bazzett, do you have any thoughts? I mean, you're a pretty prolific writer though, so I'm just kind of curious.
I create that impression because I'm old.
Okay, well,
till I was 48, you know. 46, I don't know, it's just somewhere in there. But mine's pretty simple. There's a quote by Saul Bellow that said, the writer is merely the reader moved to emulation. And so I just read. And I figure, and if I read, generally speaking, a lot of times that prompts, and I read widely, and I've got very, you know, very weird idiosyncratic tastes, and I follow them. I don't read what I supposedly, you know, am supposed to be reading. And often that will kick things up. And when it doesn't, then at least I've read. You know, eventually that river, I think of it like a tidal river. When you see, like in an estuary, when the tide comes in and suddenly you're like, the river's flowing the opposite direction, you know.
Yeah.
And then the tide's going out, the river's flowing in its proper direction again for like 10 hours, you know. I think that's the reading and writing thing. So
do you just read poetry exclusively, or just everything?
I don't. I mean, Yoko Ogawa's The Memory Police, Jose Saramago, those were things that were kicking me kind of out of a slight funk this summer. I read things that feed my imagination because I think that's where so much of my work comes from. And it's also really helpful to just get back inside your body and think about the acoustics of language, and as it's something that lives like in the chambers of your lungs. I think having to make sense or thinking about making sense it's a lot of pressure, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's to think about the sound of words.
Well, that's great advice. Thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.
MKD, any thoughts about how you been? Have you been this summer, this fall?
Yeah. So I write poetry and I write essays. And in my essay writing, I'm typically motivated by a conversation that I want to have. And for all its downsides, 2020 has been generous in promoting conversations that I want to have and things that I want to talk about. I do that a lot in essays. So I've been writing a lot this year about George Floyd, about race and justice, about my personal experiences as a Black man in an anti-Black country. And I often feel inspired by those kinds of conversations. So I guess in a way, the newspaper, the news of the day can function as a prompt for me. I have transitioned away from a 9-to-5 hustle toward an arts practice this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I have a lot of great mentors along those lines. But one of the things that it's allowed is more time to play. And a thing that I've been thinking about a lot this year is like, just what if I'm at my writing desk and my primary focus is just fun? Like if something comes out, that's cool. And if not, that doesn't matter either. If I feel like drawing, I'll draw. If I feel like taking scissors to a poem and seeing what happens, like if I piece it together differently, I'll do that too. But like, what if my purpose is not production, it's just occupation and joy? And it's been away from considerations about whether it's good or good enough, and just create and have fun. I find that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that last Eggshells. Was that your last poem? It was sort of like a performance piece with the recording. That was amazing. I really love that. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Mute, unmute, mute, unmute. There's a lot happening in that work.
It was part of it, right? I mean,
sure, for sure.
Yeah. And Michael Torres, I read a recent interview with you on Fear No Lit, and how you never throw away poems. Is that sort of part of how you work through your writer's block, if you have it at all? Or
I believe that, like, if I didn't finish something, it's just because I don't have the skill to do it yet. And like, I actually was recently working on an essay, and the draft right before that is from 2017. So I was like kind of like laughing about that. Yeah, and I think so. Like, I guess the two pieces of advice I have is like, one, if I have a blank page and I am blocked, I usually kind of like what Michael Bazzett said, like I go back to some writing. Usually it's to poetry that I like. When I first started falling in love with poetry, it's like that, and it reminds me like of my younger, very high energy for writing self, and that kind of kickstarts it. If I'm working on something and I get like a block on like something that's already on the page, I usually like leave a bit of white space and then write the word notes, and then I just kind of do some automatic writing for 15 minutes on what I think the piece is trying to do, and I talk to myself about the piece without the pressure of having it get it finished or done, but I'm still like, I'm writing and I'm like sort of thinking about it.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Michael Lee, any advice about writer's block at all, or how you get through moments of not producing work?
Oh, now I'm really a part of the mics.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like Michael Torres. I really go back and look at some old work. I don't, although there are probably maybe some poems I should get rid of, but even like the one that I just read, I think I first tried to write that like two years ago, and it was bizarre and 10 different poems in one. And then I was reading and kind of, using whatever I was reading to unlock. And then I was like, oh, wait, I think I know how to do it. And so, yeah, a lot of times it's either going back to old stuff, or just really reading and filling myself up with as much as I can. I always think there's just poems are just waiting to be unlocked. And I think they're most often either unlocked by experiences or by other poems.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michael. Well, I want to say thanks to all the mics and for everyone for being here. We do have 2 special messages from our amazing instructors. We have Heidi and Matt waiting in the wing. So Heidi, do you want to say a special message to our students?
Yeah, I would love to. Like so many others are saying, like we miss being able to come out and share writing community with you, and by making these videos we're trying to create that community again. And Sue had asked if I could talk about like what I've been doing with my writing and what I can leave you with. And I think we think about writing as being so solitary, and yet we're all craving community, as we can all see. You know, we're all craving community with each other, we're craving community with you. And so I haven't been writing a lot. I just have not been able to have the focus. But during that time, I've found myself in a way trying to create community in my brain by reaching out and writing. I've been writing reviews of books that I'm reading, and they're very low stress little mini reviews that I do on Twitter, mostly, where I'm pairing a reading with a perfume, since I'm also really into perfume. So I like read a book and I give a little thumbnail of it, what it was about, and then I pick a perfume that I think matches with it. And so it's just kind of a fun way to do that. I've been writing craft essays, and I think one of the videos that's going to be going out through the MPWW programming rose out of one of the craft essays that I wrote about making lateral moves in writing. So thinking about craft and how people are putting together work, reading others' work closely. I sometimes will copy work that I admire by hand, because it slows me down so much to do that by hand. Whether it's, I write both poetry and essays, but doing both of those, and not just the words, but thinking about the sentences and even the punctuation to try to think through, you know, how is this getting put together? What can I learn from it? And because my writing, both my poetry and nonfiction, come out of language, I'll go back to reading authors who are kind of touchstones for me. So I'll read like Lucy Brock-Broido for language, Ada Limon and Jane Hirschfield for clarity, Leanne Roripaugh for surprise and innovation, and Bridget Pegeen Kelly for wonder. So those are some of the ways that I, even when I'm stuck and not writing, that I'm still trying to engage with the writing community by thinking about other people's words as well, until I can get my own pump primed again. We miss you all, and I can't wait until we can be back in a community for real together.
Thank you, Heidi. And as Michael Bazzett said in the chat, reviews are an act of love. So thank you for doing that. I mean, it's hard though on Twitter. It's like 200 characters. Can you even, that's like really challenging, right?
I usually do them in about 2 or 3 tweets, like paired together, where I have a little, it's part of the challenge, is like, can I write a 1 tweet review and a 1 tweet pairing with a perfume, and then explain why I think they go together.
Well, that's awesome. I'm gonna have to take a look. Thank you, Heidi. And we're gonna just close out with Matt. Any words for the students inside?
Hi, I want to say hello first. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay, good. You know, I don't know. I've been struggling to write, I think, during this, I think as everybody has. One thing I always try to do is to see things anew, and I find like the most invigorating poetry is kind of like that, which takes the most common thing, right, and describes it in a way you've never heard, or it like allows you to see it in a different way. So I wrote this poem. It was kind of an assignment for the Nobel conference at Gustavus, where I teach. And it was supposed to be about the environment, but it was really mostly about writing to the future, right? Like what would the world look like to a poet in the future looking back at our current times, right? As a way to kind of like think about it. I was just having difficulty processing everything that was going on. And I should say I wrote this before the pandemic, but it's more sort of focused on how humans are kind of just ruining the world, I guess. So my prompt, which this poem is kind of about, is to write a poem to a future poet or your future self looking back at your current self, or yeah, just those two. So to a future poet, or to your future self, or from your future self back to now. So this is called, I'm just going to read a poem because I'm terrible at giving advice. That's okay. Is that all right? Okay, sorry. It's called Poem to a Future Poet. Athena, you've heard this one already. Poem to a Future Poet. Poems were so easy. Things just grew from the ground. And there was so much water, we poured it over a million tiny green tongues guarding our homes. Outside was a place you could go to escape the fields of ceiling, and the first sky was just there, hovering above, casually blue and gray or black with stars like disparate pixels, a distant feeling no one could grasp. When there was nothing to hold on to, we made things that made us unhappy. So we drank happiness light. Borders rose around us like walls, but a line was simply the distance between two thoughts. Disconnection became a form of kinship, and windows were clear screens that always streamed the outdoors. What version is the sky now? When did it last upload? You've probably heard about trees. They were long wrists with hands at both ends. We could barely hear them whispering to each other in the darkness underneath us. Sorry, just a few more things. Snow was what happened when water fell asleep. Paper was what happened when trees became angels. Breathing was a thing we just did, and the future could be looked into but not seen, like a sheet of glass thinned into edgelessness. Sometimes the sun would reach all the way down here and touch you, and it didn't cost anything. Our faces were often in the presence of each other's faces. Sorrow was all the rage. We believed we could escape ourselves. That's it.
That was amazing. It's always so nice to hear your new poems, Matt. Thank you for sharing, and thank you to all the mics, and thank you to everyone here tonight. It went a little long, but it is a holiday special, so it was just awesome to share space with you tonight. And to all our students and everyone watching on the inside, we're thinking of you. We miss you. Happy holidays, Happy New Year, and we hope 2021 brings just better things for all of us. So thank you for joining us, everyone. Yay, the first Before Time reading series. Reading is over. If you want to turn your mics on just to say hello and goodbye.
Hey, Sue, you're awesome.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Hey,
Hello.
Woo!
Thanks for letting me read a poem.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks for letting me be an honorary Michael.
Anytime, Matt.
Megan wanted to know, is Michael your middle name? No?
No, it's Alan.
Okay.
It's
Not
pretty
tonight,
boring.
it is.
Pretty boring.
Well, we'll just pretend it's Michael. So good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
No.
shout out as we're leaving to the
Tina's-
Stillwater Writers Collective and Zeke and Chris, who started it, inspired this reading series, and Will and Jeff and Fong and Vaughn and others who are keeping it going strong, and we'll be back at it when we're back in the fall.
Yeah, I want to say I miss all you guys
Yeah.
so much.
Miss you all. Take
Yeah.
good care.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.